Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today's wine is taking us to Saumur-Champigny, and we're looking at the Domaine des Sables Verts 2020 Saumur-Champigny Les Poyeux. Domaine des Sables Verts is a historical domain based in Varrains that was in the hands of the Duveau family for 10 generations. With retirement looming, brothers Alain and Dominique Duveau made the decision to put the domaine up for sale. And the buyers were Caroline Meurée and her husband Hervé Malinge, who met while they were pursuing their wine studies in Bordeaux. With the desire to move a little bit closer to where they grew up, Hervé from Vendée and Caroline from Picardy, and Sables Verts up for sale, the couple made the decision to put down roots in Saumur-Champigny and in 2019 embark on an exciting and ambitious new journey as the young proprietors of Domaine des Sables Verts. This domain spans around 16.5 hectares. That's 33 parcels in total, dotted across 5 communes. And of this, about 15.5 hectares are planted with Cabernet Franc. And they began to convert their vineyards to organic viticulture right from day one. They are currently making 4 expressions of Cabernet Franc, and these include their Cuvée Domaine, as well as 3 Cuvées parcellaires, which include Les Clos Foraines, Chantre, and Les Poyeux, which is, of course, the wine that we are looking at today. So, Les Poyeux. This is quite possibly the most famous Cabernet Franc vineyard, not only in the Loire, but one would argue perhaps even the entire world. And that is in large part due to the reputation of a little domain that you may have heard of, Clos Rougeard. So this lieu-dit is located in the commune of Chassé. We're in the eastern part of Chassé, east of the villages of Chassé and Varrains, and the eastern border of Les Poyeux actually hugs the western border of the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire. This vineyard is without question a very highly regarded vineyard site. Some might even suggest that it is a Grand Cru level vineyard. But there's one important thing to note about this vineyard right off the top, and that is its sheer size. This lieu-dit spans 44 hectares. That's 108 acres for my American friends. It is huge. And actually, it accounts for a little over a quarter of all the vineyard area of the commune of Chassé, which is pretty impressive. Naturally, as one would expect of a vineyard of this size, the terroir here is by no means homogeneous. Now, based on my conversations with vignerons, my research, and having walked this vineyard site on a number of occasions, we can roughly divide Les Poyeux into 3 main parts. First, we have the section that is to the north of the route D225, and this is an area of about 30 hectares, and it can be divided into 2 parts. Firstly, we have the section that is often referred to as Les Hauts Poyeux, or Upper Poyeux, and this is in the most northerly part of the vineyard, and the parcels here, I would say we have about 10 hectares in terms of overall parcels, and the vines here are at an elevation of around 42 to 64 meters above sea level. And this section of 10 hectares actually has a bit more of a northwest facing exposure. And then we have the heart of Les Poyeux, and this is an area of about 20 hectares. And this is more or less situated mid-slope on this little knoll that the lieu-dit is situated on. The parcels here will have any number of exposures, but mainly west, southwest, or full south-facing exposures. And these parcels range in elevation from around 44 to 62 meters above sea level. Finally, we have the section that is often referred to as Les Bas Poyeux, or Lower Poyeux, and this section is south of the route D225. And this section of Les Poyeux is actually a little bit more homogeneous in terms of its overall viticultural landscape. The parcels here tend to face mostly south, and the elevation ranges from around 40 to 54 meters above sea level. Now, in terms of soil, while it is probably obvious that we do find quite a bit of variability from parcel to parcel, we do find 3 main terroir units across this site. Firstly, in the easternmost part of the vineyard, this is the section that is hugging the border of the commune of Dampierre-sur-Loire. Here, we're more or less at the highest elevation of the site, and this is actually where we find soils that date to the Sannonian age. These are much deeper soils, and we find topsoil textures of sand, silty sand, or clay sand, and then those are followed by a subsoil that is either sand, silty sand, or clay sand in texture. And then as we move west across the vineyard site, then we get into this narrow band of vineyards that are influenced by the upper Turonian yellow tuffeau chalk. And this is more or less in the central part as well as the upper part, the Hauts Poyeux section of the vineyard. So this area where we find the upper Turonian yellow tuffeau chalk, we'll find more shallow topsoils, and the topsoil texture tends to be a sand, silt, clay mix with about 25% clay content. Finally, as we move west further still, we have a section of Les Poyeux that is on the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk. This is a glauconitic micaceous chalk here, known locally as craie verte. This section of that is on the middle Turonian tuffeau is localized really in the western part of the heart of Les Poyeux, and almost all of Les Bas Poyeux is on the middle Turonian tuffeau. In terms of topsoil, again, we find a mix of sand, silt, and clay with about 25% clay content. Now, why does the heterogeneity of this vineyard site matter? Well, inevitably, this combination of soils, topsoils, subsoils, the impact of the tuffeau or lack thereof, this will impact that individual parcel's viticulture and the viticultural environment of those individual parcels. So in terms of water retention, vine vigor, the precocity of the site, so whether it is a bit of a warmer or cooler section of the vineyard. And ultimately, this will then influence how the vigneron goes about their work in the vineyard. This will influence that parcels and the berries in terms of their degree and rate of maturity in terms of sugar and phenolic maturity, and that balance of sugar and phenolic maturity. And this, as I've noticed in the Loire, is that combination and that degree of maturity and that combination of sugar and phenolic maturity and how that is achieved in their parcels will then influence how the vigneron chooses to work with that fruit in the cellar, which ultimately will influence the finished wine. Now, all of this is to say that while this is a very highly regarded vineyard site, a very qualitative vineyard site, we have 17 vignerons here that have parcels, and inevitably that makes it virtually impossible to define, at least at the moment, an expression of Les Poyeux. Now, looking at today's wine a little bit more closely, this is coming from a combined a little over 1.8 hectares of vines. And the vines are localized in the southern section of Les Poyeux, so Les Bas Poyeux, so we're south of the route D225. And Caroline and Hervé's parcels are actually localized in the northwestern part of Les Bas Poyeux, and we're at an average elevation of around 46 meters above sea level, and the parcels have a bit more of a southwest facing exposure. Now, in terms of soil, this section of Les Bas Poyeux is actually a little bit more homogeneous. So what we have here is about 50 centimeters of a sand, silt, clay topsoil. It's limon, sableau, argileux. So we have about 25% clay content. And then we hit the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk bedrock. That's that craie verte. Now, the other thing that is notable about their parcels is the age of the vines. So the vines were planted by Massal selection in 1952, 53, and 60, 61. So in 2020, these would have been 60 to 70-year-old vines. And Caroline and Hervé noted to me that this age of vines and the experience of these vines make them a little bit less susceptible to hydric stress, and that's particularly good in vintages like 2019, 2020, 2022, for example. But that also means that these parcels are a little bit more consistent in terms of bud break, flowering, as well as yield. Now, looking at the winemaking for this wine, All the fruit is hand harvested, hand sorted, and destemmed. And the fruit is transferred via gravity into stainless steel tanks. And all of their stainless steel tanks are located in their tuffeau cellars, so below the surface at a nice ambient temperature. And the fermentation is in stainless steel with indigenous yeast. And the fermentation temperature ranges from around 13 degrees Celsius to a peak of about 25 degrees Celsius. And then in terms of their approach to extractions, what they will do here is some active pumping over during the very early stages of fermentation to extract the fruit flavors, as well as color, but not tannin. And then what they will do is maceration through infusion for the duration of the fermentation and post-fermentation maceration, with the odd pumping over and gentle wetting of the cap as needed to keep things nice and healthy. And the total time on skins is around 22 days. The finished wine is a combination of free run wine and press wine, and the aging for the 2020 vintage took place in a combination of stainless steel and 10 hectoliter sandstone amphora. And in terms of that aging, it was for around 12 months. Now, Caroline and Hervé did note to me that they have evolved their élevage for Les Poyeux since their first vintage in 2019. So they have since completely eliminated stainless steel as a choice for élevage. They still use it for the fermentation, but the élevage is now focused in the amphoras, as well as also in some older barriques from Bordeaux. And the idea is that the amphora provides micro-oxygenation, but also preserving the freshness and minerality of the wine, while the barrique gives a bit more of a smooth, supple, velvety center to the finished wine. And they've also extended their élevage. Initially it was around 12 months. The élevage is now 18 months, followed by about 6 months in bottle. So let's dive in. So one thing to note off the top with this cuvée is it does have a bit of a sunny character, which is very representative of this vintage. And I would say that there's a beautiful purity to the nose, a nice freshness. So while there is some definitive ripeness to the nose, it still smells very fresh. There's a lot of depth to the nose as well. You can sense that there's quite a bit of concentration here. And then I would say that this nose actually leans a little bit more fruit forward, and the profile of the fruits is a little bit more darker. So I'm getting like kind of nice bright black raspberry. There's a little bit of black currant here. There's a bit of dried wild blueberry as well. Maybe even a little bit of cherry there. And then we start to feel the layers of the herbal character, the earthy undertones. And I would say that this leans definitely in this wonderful evergreen kind of space. I'm getting a mix of cedar leaves and cedar wood, but there is this foresty edge to this wine. Touch of rosemary here as well, which is quite nice. There is a little delicate floral undertone to the wine. It's not super perfumey or aromatic, but there is like a delicate dried violet note, I think, as well. Yeah, I would say dried violets, maybe even dried lilacs. Purple flowers for sure. There's also a nice spice profile to the nose, which is really interesting because there was no oak influence here, and often I get spice more on the palate with Cabernet Franc, but this has a lovely, warming, delicate spice on the nose as well. Yeah, it smells really, really lovely. Just super inviting, a lot of complexity on the nose, a lot of depth as well, and yeah, let's dive in. In terms of the fruit profile, those darker fruits come through bang on as they did on the nose. And I would say actually the palate leans a little bit more earthy, which I totally love. And the palate has a bit more tertiary layers as well. So we're starting to see some evolution in this wine, which is quite nice. So I'm getting a bit of dried autumn leaves. There's a little bit of a tobacco note as well. There's a touch of like a morel mushroom thing going on. There's also that classic graphite pencil shaving edge to this wine, which I absolutely love in Cabernet Franc when it has a little bit more time in the bottle. The spice comes through in a really nice way on the palate. It's a bit of allspice, a touch of cardamom. There's a little bit of nutmeg here too. In terms of the wine's acidity, it's very vibrant, and there really is a nice mouth-watering, cleansing impact to the acidity. Yeah, it's really quite lovely. In terms of the tannins are finely woven. There's a little bit of a firmness to the tannins, quite velvety in texture, and they finish with a nice, fine, chalky firmness to them on the finish. The tannins are beautifully managed here. There is enough tannins here to give a degree of structure to this wine, but they are beautifully in balance with the acidity as well as the fruit concentration in the wine as well. What's interesting about how this wine presents in the glass is there's really two factors kind of going on here. So the initial attack presents with this fruit forwardness, this plushness, it's round, it's broad, and that fruit impact at the beginning is really quite pronounced. And then what happens through the middle palate experience and then through the finish is the wine becomes absolutely laser focused. Like the acidity comes in and it's as if it pulls the wine experience, the palate experience all the way through. The palate becomes more focused, there's more tension, becomes linear, and it's really quite impressive. It's as if that acidity and that tension kind of is just shrinking, cinching everything in terms of the palate experience. Yeah. It's really quite impressive. There is this broadness, this roundness and fullness. There's a generosity to this wine and a certain sense of power to this wine as well. But how that is then working with this finish, this middle through the length of the wine and that tension and the way the acidity is pulling everything through is really quite impressive. And it gives the palate this sense of levity as well, and this almost ethereal finish. So the wine just kind of dances through the finish, which is really quite lovely. It's concentrated, it's complex, there's a lot of depth here, it's superbly balanced as well, and it's super impressive. This is a very contemplative wine. It is definitely a wine for the cellar. I let this decant for a little bit, so this has had plenty of oxygen, but this will certainly go the distance in terms of aging for sure. But it's a beautiful expression of Cabernet Franc. I think it is very representative of this prestigious terroir, Les Poyeux, and it is a terrific introduction to Domaine des Sables Verts. I had the pleasure of visiting Caroline and Hervé back in the fall. They were kind enough to accommodate me at the Domaine at the very last minute when I was there, especially during such a busy time. And we had such a lovely tasting, and it was finally great for me to get a proper introduction to their range of wines and their work with Cabernet Franc. I had heard so much about this domaine from wine professionals and people that had seen the wines in the market, and I had not yet had a chance to spend time with them. So I was thrilled to do a full tasting and really get a sense of what they're doing, and it's super exciting. They have accomplished an immense amount in just such a short period of time in terms of the wines, but also in terms of their global footprint. They have achieved really good distribution globally. The wines are available in many of the major markets, which is super exciting. And, there's a lot to look forward to here with regards to this domain. And like I said, they have accomplished a lot, and the wines speak for themselves. And they are without question, one of the rising stars in the Saumur-Champigny appellation. So, if you have not had the pleasure of tasting the wines from Domaine des Sables Verts, this is definitely one to put on your radar. Of course, if you have had the wines before, I would love to know what you thought of them in the comments below. And of course, as always, I'll be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.